This is Matt with Synlinks.com, and we're talking with Paul Yan, Chief Creative Officer and Co-Studio Head of Toys for Bob, Joshua Nadelberg, Art Director at Toys for Bob, and Stephan Vankov, Music Remixer at Toys for Bob, all about Spyro Reignited Trilogy.
So you've already talked with Stuart Copeland, so you've probably already heard the big news. Music.
Yeah, so Stuart Copeland has told me that you guys have added an element to where you can play the original soundtrack.
Yes. Stephan here has been working with Stuart on music. It's a huge part of the Spyro game.
Yeah, it's music has been definitely kind of a tricky aspect of the game because the original music is so beloved by fans. And yeah, it was an interesting creative challenge to figure out how to, give people both an experience that they remember with the original music, but also offer it in a way that feels fresh and new. And we met with Stuart a few times over the course of the project just to align with him and make sure that we're that we're faithfully reconstructing his music for the game. In order to achieve what we wanted to, we had to pretty much build the tracks from the ground up. In order to do things like dynamic music, which, as you're playing the game, music will gently introduce different layers or crossfade to different variations based on what Spyro's doing. And thought that it's a really interesting way of presenting these compositions and themes to players. And we're also really aware of the fact that, a lot of people have, because music is so personal, people have this deep emotional attachment to how things sounded on the original titles. So very early on, we had the feature to switch the soundtrack to the original music at any point while you're playing the game. So
yeah, I've been enjoying it for a long time. So it's really great to be able to unveil this to the public today.
That's really cool too. So how much pressure has been on you guys to recreate this trilogy and keep that nostalgic factor to it?
No pressure. It's
none.
Super easy.
Yeah. People don't care about Spyro at all.
No, I think BV set the bar really high with Crash and Sane Trilogy, and early on we talked about how they approach things, and I think we took a very similar path, which is do the homework, understand the source material, talk to the original creators, be in direct contact with the fans. And we've got a long history with Spyro. Spyro has been, the original games have been an inspiration for a lot of our games. Certainly for Skylanders, we've taken a lot of the ideas, the characters, and the worlds as inspiration for that whole universe. So it's been great for us to have this full circle back to return to classic Spyro and do him justice in this way 20 years later.
We were very conscious, though, about being faithful to the gameplay as well as the spirit of the visuals and the story. And we actually extracted data from the original games to make sure that the jumps have the same height and everything is precisely recreated at a gameplay level. And then visually, we really just tried to imagine what would Insomniac have done if they made this game now? We were talking to MJ, one of the original producers, yesterday, and he told us that in 1998, the enemy character was limited to 120 polygons. And I was just joking a minute ago that there's well more than 120 polygons in Spyro's eyeball at this point. So there's just so much more detail and the potential for more storytelling and character to be infused into the game. It's been exciting to show the guys down there at Insomniac, even early on in the project, just what we were doing with the world, and they loved it. They were so enthused when they saw our initial concept art and some of the early work that we had done. They were just floored by the way that we'd interpreted their world. So that gave us all the confidence in the world as we proceeded to build out the rest of the game.
It's interesting that you talk about, space that the original game had, because when I was talking to Stuart, he said that the transitions and a lot of the different musical elements got cut because they just didn't have a lot of space. So was that something that Insomniac maybe told you guys about, that you guys wanted to add to the game, or is it something that you guys came up on your own?
In terms of visual space?
Visual, musical transitions, either one.
Yeah, well, I mean, from a visual standpoint, they were limited so much by technology, you know, and one of the big revolutions that Spyro introduced back then was just these long vistas and being able to, like, feel like you were in a big world. And they achieved that spectacularly, but to do so meant that the world had to be pretty low res, you know, like, you feel like you're in a place and there's a building over there and there are hills, but, like, it's a green, grassy polygon underneath you, and that's about it. So there was like the foundation of a world for us to just enrich, right? And that's what we tried to do, is to make it more immersive. And we talk about like this idea of like the rosy glasses of nostalgia. When people like think about playing the game, they have a vision that is much more full than what the game actually looked like. And so we were just floored when people first saw the work that we'd done, how they felt like we'd really kind of achieved what they remembered, even though there's now so much more information there for you to engage with.
Well, one of my colleagues, she's a super fan. She became super ecstatic when she found out about this interview. And she told me I had to tell you two things. First of all, she loves all of you. And second of all, why did you choose not to have rotating numbers with the gem counter?
Starting with the love.
I think honestly, the UI layer in the engine we're using just wants to use 2D art more so than additional 3D art.
That was a conversation with Insomniac too. Is that they wanted to use sprites, but they ran out of space. So one of the conversations, they put the 3D models up there to put the numbers up there. One of the problems with it gets a little jaggy up so close to the camera. And so, you know, for us, putting up clean sprites was a great way of tying it up. And then also, one of the things is we're thinking about the game as a trilogy, as a cohesive between the three. So as opposed to like making decisions just for one game, we wanted to tie it all together. And UI was one of the areas where we wanted to make it more cohesive and make sure the language was all consistent and even the treatment across the three are the same.
People just noticed, I think, online today that like the colors change in the different games. So we've tried to introduce like little things like that to give each game their special spice.
That's so cool because it helps it, you know, stay unique to what you guys are working with too. So one of the things, speaking of it being unique, my biggest takeaway from playing it at E3 was that it seems like this trilogy has a lot more personality, and I think a lot of it has to do with the updated dragons. So can you tell me a little bit about the process of crafting each unique one?
That was like my favorite part of the project, to be honest. We when we were beginning to work on it, we just realized that like we had this amazing opportunity to add additional storytelling layers to the game visually, and the dragons are this like it should feel awesome when you unlock each dragon. And there's already these factions, right? There's the artisan dragons and the peacekeeper dragons, and in the original game they didn't, like we were saying, where they didn't have the ability to really tell as much of a visual story as we can today. So, you know, we thought about like what separates an artisan dragon from a peacekeeper, from a magic crafter, and visually how can we make these characters into like unique personalities. People became really attached to them. People have their favorite dragons, even when back in the day they were just like slightly fatter and a different color. And now like they really feel like characters from a world, you know, like we joke about how much we love each of these dragons, and they've become a huge favorite aspect of the game.
Do you think that there is an option or an avenue to maybe have like figures of each dragon?
That's not the first that we've heard of that request, and even within the studio as well. I think we would all love to have.
I would love that.
Statues of them. They're great looking.
Yeah, it'd be great, right? You know, maybe even a port into Skylanders. Who knows? Who knows? So, what is something you want the fans of the Spyro series to know ahead of the game's September 21st release?
Honestly, I think the most important thing for them to know is that like the love that Insomniac put into the game 20 years ago, like we've matched that. We've really like passionately poured our hearts into it to try to deliver a game that is as beautiful and wonderful and sparks the imagination of fans in a new way. We really put a lot into it, and we hope that they feel that.
This is I just wanted to add that this is for September 21st on PS4 and Xbox One.
Yes, for $39.99. Thank you so much, guys. Once again, that is Paul Yan, Chief Creative Officer and Co-Studio Head for Toys for Bob, Joshua Nadelberg, Art Director at Toys for Bob, and Stephan Vankov, Music Remixer at Toys for Bob. Don't forget, Spyro Reignited Trilogy releases September 21st on, as they said, Xbox One and PlayStation 4 for the low price of $39.99.